Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. Like I mentioned in my previous episode, I had to change up my recording setup just a little bit, so I might sound a tad different for this and other episodes. So week 2 of the official spoiler season has started off with an absolute bang with Mech Titan Core. I mean, Megazord is here, and this might be the coolest card of all time. Now, if you haven't seen that episode just yet, make sure you go check it out at some point, but not before you stick around for this exciting episode, because we've got Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion, and this commander is reminiscent of a very powerful card, Bolas' Citadel. So, what exactly does this commander want to do? Well, let's jump into it to find out. So to start things off really quick, here is the image that we have for the actual card. Now I do want to put out this disclaimer, this has not been confirmed to be an official spoiler, an official card, so please take everything I am saying with a grain of salt. That being said, to make discussing this card easier, here's my custom version of it, and again a big thank you to MTG.design for existing. You are a fantastic site. Nashi is a 3/2 rat ninja with ninjutsu for 3 and a black that costs 1 black. When it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So first up, and something to note here, yes, this is a commander, and yes, it has ninjutsu, but it does not have commander ninjutsu. So unlike Yuriko, you can't actually just ninjutsu this out from the command zone, which is a good and bad thing in my opinion. One bad part about Yuriko, or at least one thing that people see as a major issue with the card, is that like a commander like Derevi, it can get around commander attacks very easily. So because of that, it can be quite overpowered with the right kinds of builds. So a limiting factor on this commander is not necessarily a bad thing. That being said, again, since it doesn't have commander ninjutsu, you can't actually get this out from your command zone with ninjutsu. So unless you've got a way to bounce Nashi back to your hand or a reason to do so, that part is just pretty much just text that isn't there. Regardless, even just ignoring that piece of text though, the rest of this card is actually pretty spicy and pretty exciting. Again, when this hits, every single player has to exile the top card of your library, and you can cast up to one of those cards, and the way that you're casting it though, is, again, cheating on mana cost by essentially being able to cast it for free, though when it comes to free, there is kind of an asterisk there because you use life instead of mana. Now, in a format commander, life is very much an abundant resource since you start off at 40 life, and of course, since you're in black, you've got plenty of ways to actually gain a lot of life, like, you know, Gary, everyone's favorite. So you can pretty easily justify utilizing a lot of life to cast a ton of spells for free with this commander. Now, obviously you can find ways to set yourself up so that you're getting certain cards off the top of your library that you can cast with this commander, but there's also, you know, just the random chance that you hit some incredible things off the top of your opponent's libraries, which can be a lot of fun. This commander can definitely have some really explosive starts. I mean, just think about this play. Turn 1, Dark Ritual, cast Nashi. Turn 2, swing with Nashi. Obviously, you're going to be able to get through on at least one opponent, you know, unless every single one of them has a drop on turn 1 for blocking, but most likely they don't. And yeah, you hit an opponent, and then you get to exile the top card of everyone's library. Let's say that you exile, oh, I don't know, someone's Blightsteel Colossus. Yeah, I'll pay 12 life on turn 2 to cast a Blightsteel Colossus. And then you pretty much have an easy win from there. Or at least I should say most of the time. And yeah, is this a little pie in the sky? Is it that magical Christmas wonderland? Yeah, probably, but still, I mean, there are some really big and powerful plays that can happen early on in the game with this. That being said, obviously when building around this commander, there are plenty of things that you need to be considering, but before we get into those cards, one thing really quick. Obviously, this card is somewhat reminiscent of Bolas' Citadel. It's a legendary artifact for 3 black, 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 and it says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. So yes, obviously there are some differences. Again, with Nashi, you need to actually hit an opponent to be able to get that trigger to get cards off the top of everyone's library. So that is one difference. Obviously you need to hit, and the other difference is that you are getting a card off of everyone's library, though you can only cast one of them. And obviously with Bolas' Citadel, you can just keep casting card after card after card off the top of your library as long as you can, pay the life and cast the cards. For the most part with Nashi, you are limited to just one card a turn, though there are some ways around that, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. So yeah, in my eyes though, Nashi is definitely a unique twist on Bolas' Citadel, and in ways it's kind of like a combination of this and another commander out there. And that would of course be Atali Primal Storm, a 6/6 Elder Dinosaur which has, whenever it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. You may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So obviously a few differences here. First off, this is an attack trigger, not a combat damage on player trigger. Now, this is going to be easier to actually get that trigger, but it's also, well, in some ways less abusable. And we'll talk about some cards that can be abused with Nashi here in a bit. And one other key difference is obviously that you can cast any number of those spells without paying their mana cost, so you're not just limited to one of those spells, and on top of that, you don't have to actually pay life to cast those cards. Now that being said, obviously Atali has a mana cost of 4 red, which is a lot higher than Nashi, so you can't exactly just get this out really quickly to get a lot of advantage out of it. So yeah, there are definitely some differences with this, higher commander versus a lower to the ground commander. It's going to be a bit more aggressive. So because Nashi does need to hit a player for you to actually get that trigger, let's consider cards like Whispersoul Cloak, Prowler's Helm, and Trailblazer's Boots. Each of these are fantastic pieces of equipment that can help you get your commander through. Whispersoul Cloak says equipped creature can't be blocked and has Shroud, so not only can help us get our commander through, but it also can protect it too. And then Prowler's Helm says equipped creature can't be blocked except by walls, and yeah, the vast majority of decks out there don't have any walls, so this is basically just your creature is unblockable. Unless you're playing against an Arcades the Strategist deck, then you're probably going to need to swing elsewhere. And then Trailblazer's Boots can get you through against a lot of opponents as well. Pretty much every opponent is going to have at least one non-basic land, and it says equipped creature has non-basic land walk. Chances are incredibly unlikely that you're going to be going up against 3 players that each have no non-basics in play. So yeah, basically your commander is unblockable, at least against one of your opponents, and that's basically all you need to do again, just hit one opponent. And of course, there are plenty of other cards that give different kinds of evasion, like, Fear or Intimidate or even just Flying, that can usually get you through on at least one opponent, so make sure you're considering those too. Moving on though, let's talk about some ways to take even more advantage of that trigger with cards like Fire Shrieker, Grappling Hook, and Psionic Resonator. Fire Shrieker and Grappling Hook are both going to give your commander double strike, which is huge with a commander that depends on a combat damage trigger. So instead of just hitting that opponent once, you essentially get to hit them twice, and you're going to get that trigger twice. That means instead of exiling, again, 4 cards if there are 4 players at the table, you're exiling 8 in total, and you can play up to 2 of them. Now, obviously, you're picking 1 from each of those piles, but yeah, doubling up the amount of value that you're getting can be huge with a commander like this. And speaking of doubling value, let's talk about Psionic Resonator, an artifact that has pay 2 tap, copy target triggered ability you control, you may choose targets with a copy. So this is another way to double up our commander's trigger and to get more card advantage out of it. Now, like I mentioned before, obviously there are going to be times where you hit something massive off an opponent's library, and now you can cast that and that can really help you out. But there's also going to be times where you want to set yourself up with your own cards, so you can utilize cards like Vampiric Tutor, Varagoth, and Crystal Ball. Vampiric Tutor says search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it, you lose 2 life. So obviously this is incredibly powerful and pretty expensive tutor as well, but yeah, this can definitely help you out with a commander like this. Essentially, before you're going to get that trigger, set yourself up with the exact card that you want on top of your library. But a much cheaper way, money-wise at least, to do this is with Varagoth, which has Boast for 1 and a black, and it says target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. So this can actually be utilized in multiple ways. Again, obviously you can just, search your library for whatever card that you want and put it on top of it, but if you know an opponent has some pretty juicy things in their library, you can put one of their cards on top that you want, and then have fun hitting and casting it. And of course, there are plenty of other effects out there that can help you set the top of your library. I mean, Scry is just one of them, and a fantastic Scry card is Crystal Ball. By paying 1 and tapping this, you Scry 2, so look at the top 2 cards, you can choose to keep any of them on top in any order, and then the rest on the bottom. So if you find something juicy, keep it on top, or if you're, hitting nothing, put it on the bottom. And I mean, like I mentioned before, there are plenty of juicy things that you can hit, and some things that can be incredibly deadly very early if you do hit them, like, Blightsteel Colossus, that 11/11 with Trample, Infect, and Indestructible. Yes, that's going to cost you 12 life to cast, but that's going to be 12 life well spent, and you're going to be able to finish your opponents off pretty quickly with this. Another card I can see potentially doing a lot of damage with this type of a commander is, of course, some of the Eldrazi like Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. A 12/12 Eldrazi for 10 life, and I said 10 life, 10 mana, but in this case 10 life. When you cast this spell, draw 4 cards, Annihilator 4. So yeah, make sure that you're keeping in mind, any kind of ETBs or even cast triggers because you're getting those as well. Also, in a completely different kind of way, make sure you're considering a card like Profane Tutor. It doesn't actually have a mana cost, and typically you'd have to suspend to it for 1 and a black, but again, if you actually get it with your commander's trigger, you can cast it for free, and I do mean free because it has a converted mana cost of 0, so you have to pay 0 life to actually cast this. And obviously this is an incredibly powerful card. Search your library for a card, put that card in your hand, then shuffle. So yeah, just basically a demonic tutor, but in this case, a free demonic tutor. Now when it comes to other commanders that might want to consider Nashi in the 99 of their decks, well, the first thing that came to mind was of course Yuriko the Tiger's Shadow. This is of course the Commander Ninjutsu commander that I mentioned earlier, and many Yuriko decks out there are, well, Ninja Tribal. And of course, Nashi is a fantastic ninja, and again, in that kind of a deck, you can actually just utilize that ninjutsu as well to get a free hit in. So whatever commander that you're running for your Ninja Tribal deck, I'm sure many players out there that do have Ninja Tribal are going to be very excited to see Nashi for those decks. Next up, a different kind of commander that probably isn't going to be built to Ninja Tribal, but can still utilize Nashi is Prosper Tomebound. It's a 1/4 Tiefling Warlock with Death Touch that has the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. On top of that, it has whenever you play a card from exile, create a treasure token. So this works very well with Nashi. Again, when Nashi hits, it exiles cards and you cast those from exile. Or should I say again, you cast one of those from exile, but again, obviously you can cast multiple if you hit more times, or double strike. You know what I mean. Regardless, every single time that you do cast a card from Nashi's trigger from exile, you are going to be making a treasure token thanks to Prosper. So on top of just getting a free card to cast, you also are gaining some mana advantage. Now that is temporary mana advantage, but still, treasures can be very powerful. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Nashi. And again, I do want to put the disclaimer out there, this has not been a confirmed card, so please take everything I've said in this episode with a grain of salt. That being said, if this does end up being a real card, yeah, I can see some players out there being pretty excited to build around it. It's a pretty exciting trigger. Again, even though the ninjutsu isn't really kind of going to come into play too often or at all if you're building this as your commander, the rest of it is a really exciting effect. And of course, outside of this being a commander, I'm sure there's a lot of players out there that love their Ninja Tribal decks and are going to love to add another fantastic ninja to them. But yeah, outside of this really exciting potential spoiler, there are going to be plenty of more exciting spoilers coming out, so make sure that you're staying tuned to this channel for more quick takes.
And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.